There are an unknown number of places in this world that once seemed thousands, if not millions of people, that are now completely deserted and dead. Castles, houses, islands, even entire cities that have been totally left to the elements. Now, some of these places have been abandoned on good terms, but for some, like the last one in this video, there is a dark history behind why the people have left and will never return. Here are 5 of the eeriest abandoned places in the world that are also believed by many to be haunted. Bodie. This next place is not only supposedly haunted, but is also said to be plagued by a curse. Bodie began as a small mining camp east of the Sierra Nevada mountains. It was established following the discovery of gold in 1859 by a group of prospectors led by W.S. Bodie, a man who sadly perished in a blizzard while collecting supplies and never lived to see the rise of the town that was named after him. Shortly after his death, the collapse of a mine in the area exposed a huge seam of valuable gold, followed a few years later by another huge discovery. The town grew and grew and was booming by 1878 when millions of dollars of gold bullion were being shipped out. But the growth of the town was attracting the wrong type of residents, and soon Bodie became known for its bandits. Gold mining slowly started to decline, and when a fire brought many houses to ashes in 1932, people started to leave. By the 1950s, the town of Bodie was practically abandoned. The shops, houses, cemetery, and restaurants were left as they were and remain that way to this day. And with this comes not only eerie feelings, but also many paranormal stories. The J.S. Kane house, once the residence of a prominent businessman, is now thought to be the home of his family maid who took her life after her affair with Mr. Kane was made public. The Kane house is exactly how the family left it, and visitors there have experienced the usual paranormal feelings: unexplained cold spots in the bedroom, intense pressure pushing down on them, doors seemingly slamming on their own, and apparently have witnessed the maid peering out of windows. One visitor who was walking through Bodie Cemetery said his little girl was laughing and talking to an unseen person. It's believed to have been the 3-year-old daughter of Albert and Fanny Myers, who died at Bodie in 1897. And the old collapsed mines are said to be guarded by the apparition of a white mule. Today, the ghost town of Bodie is open to the public, advertised as one of the most authentic, abandoned gold mining towns of the Old West. But be aware if you're tempted to visit. It's thought that the ghosts guard their town against theft, and anyone who dares to remove anything will be plagued by misfortune and the dreaded curse of Bodie until they return it. Those who've travelled on the London Underground will have either found it a fascinating journey filled with history and tales, or an overcrowded and claustrophobic place that you can't wait to get out of. The overcrowdedness comes from the 3.5 million people who use the underground every day, and the history is that since their construction in the 1800s, there have been plenty of ghost stories and sightings. One of the most frequent tales is that workers see people stood waiting for trains long after the stations have shut, and when they send someone down to investigate, the person has disappeared and is never seen leaving. Now, I will be talking about the underground as a whole in a most haunted places in Britain video, but there is one station that is said to be haunted and has been abandoned for 21 years. Aldwich Station was first opened in 1907 and was initially named Strand. It wasn't as successful as hoped, and passenger numbers were pretty low, so during the Second World War, Aldwich was closed and used as an air raid shelter and storage area for nearly 6 years. It reopened after the war and continued transport until the last train left the station on the evening of September the 30th, 1994. Nowadays, it's occasionally used for film sets and is sometimes open to the public. The abandoned station has retained its original features, including tiles and posters on the walls, which all add to its creepy atmosphere. There is one very frequent sighting of a ghost, and that is of a lady who is apparently seen many times by line engineers, some of which refuse to go down there, walking the abandoned tracks at night. Cleaners have also witnessed the same looking female apparition, and it's thought that she was an actress from the Royal Strand Theatre, which was demolished to make way for the station. To add to its eeriness, there is also an abandoned train from the old Northern Line, which was used in the horror movie Creep. The pitch black station and tunnels at Aldwich make for a scary atmosphere, and people from all over the world add it to their ghost hunting list when visiting the City of London. But can you just imagine being lost down there alone in the middle of the night? Poveglia Island. This completely abandoned island is located between Venice and Lido in Italy, and for centuries it's been a dumping ground for murderous, diseased and insane people. The island was first inhabited in 421 by men, women and children who fled the rampage of the barbarian invaders and settled there. However, by the 14th century the island was abandoned. In 1348, with the arrival of the bubonic plague, the Romans decided to separate the sick from the healthy, so anyone who showed the slightest sign of illness was shipped off to Poveglia without their will, where they lived their last torturous days of their life in exile. Once the inevitable happened, their bodies were burned on giant fires, but oftentimes even the living were killed this way. The islands became filthy, and after the plague passed, it was deserted. Then in 1630, when the Black Death returned, the island once again became a dumping ground for the diseased and dying. It was then abandoned again, and in 1922, one of the existing buildings was converted into a psychiatric hospital, where the mentally ill were kept in prison-like conditions. Since mental illness was not understood at all back then, the patients were not there to be treated, but to be kept away from everyone else. Apparently, the asylum doctor would perform excruciating lobotomies and experiments on the patients, but he paid the price. He fell from the asylum's bell tower. Now, it's unsure if he was driven insane by spending his time on the island and was attempting suicide, or if he was pushed by an unseen force, but after surviving the fall, as witnessed by a nurse, he was apparently strangled to death by a black shadow that hovered over him. The facility was finally closed down in 1975 and the island was again abandoned. But by this stage, well over 100,000 people had been burnt there, and as a result, human ash makes up a large amount of the island's soil. Since its closing, the bell tower has been removed, but the locals claim to hear the chime echoing from the island at night. Few people have returned since travel is strictly off limits without government approval, and those who have gone have experienced things that will stay with them for the rest of their lives. Apparently, a family did go there in hopes of buying it, but left when their daughter was violently attacked by an unseen force and needed stitches in her face. Then, when construction workers were attempting to restore the hospital building, they all stopped and left the island but would not say why. And when a man visited to take photos, the local captain who agreed to take him there refused to leave the boat and step foot on the island. In 2014, a businessman bought a 99-year lease for €400,000, and he hopes to turn it into a tourist attraction. But many believe it's only a matter of time before he realizes why this 18-acre plot of dark history is ranked as the most haunted island on the planet. This next one is a near-abandoned town with only a handful of old-time locals still living there. It's Centralia, a small Pennsylvania town that was built in 1866 to house the workers of its booming coal mining industry. It had hotels, saloons, and smart houses, and much like Bodie, its miners were getting rich through the area's growing industry. Then, in 1962, a fire from a burning landfill spilled into an unused coal mine. It then spread inside the network of anthracite-rich deposits deep underground, and the noxious fumes escaped from every orifice of the town, seeping through the pavement and pipework and eventually causing gaping sinkholes in the streets. Despite promise and plans to put the fire out, no action was taken, and by the 1980s, all plans to put the fire out were abandoned, and almost everyone had no choice but to leave. Nowadays, Centralia looks like a scene from an apocalypse movie, a desolate network of nameless streets, remains of homes reduced to rubble, steps that lead to nowhere, and 3 eerie abandoned cemeteries. A few buildings still stand, as well as a few houses that are occupied by the 8 or so residents who refuse to leave. The state are waiting for them to die so they can destroy their homes and declare Centralia a ghost town. With 99% of the area abandoned, there is no surprise that it's had its fair share of paranormal stories. Many ghost hunters go there in search of activity, and most feel like they've been watched or followed. A few years ago, a lady called Ruth Edison visited Centralia and swore that she and her friend saw a couple of what appeared to be miners walking out of a sinkhole before rising up and disappearing. Another story tells of a man who decided to visit the area when passing by with his partner. After they went into an abandoned house, they could both hear someone very clearly walking down the stairs. They assumed someone else was in there also taking a look around, as there was no way that it was an animal or the house creaking. But when the footsteps stopped at the end of the stairs, no one was there. With all its haunting stories, there is no surprise that Centralia was the inspiration for the horror movie Silent Hill, after the film's screenwriter took a visit there. It's predicted that the fire will continue burning for 250 years, long after the residents are dead and gone, and visitors who are warned not to go there will continue to explore the area in search of the past residents who had no choice but to leave their homes, and to experience what they all describe as an unexplainable feeling and atmosphere. Hashima Island. Positioned 9 miles from the Japanese city of Nagasaki is an abandoned island called Hashima. In the late 1880s, coal was found beneath the island, and it wasn't long before apartments, a school, a hospital, a cinema, restaurants, and a graveyard was being built for the coal mining workers and their families. By the 1950s, it was one of the most populated places on the planet, with 5,200 people living on the 16-acre island. But in the 1970s, the coal started to run out, and the workers were offered first-come, first-served jobs off the island. In a rush to secure their jobs and support their families, people left as fast as they could, leaving almost everything behind, and that's exactly how it stands today. But the island has a dark past that not many talk of, and it's been downplayed over the years. But it's why the Koreans have given it the name the Island of Hell. Just before the Second World War, around 600 Koreans and an unknown number of Chinese prisoners of war were forced to work in the 1,000-metre deep underground coal mines. The workers were given little food, and torture was apparently not uncommon. Although an exact figure has never been released, it's thought that upwards of 1,000 forced workers died on that island as a result of their living and working conditions. The island slavery carried on until the end of the Second World War, where non-forced work continued until its closure. Many of the locals do not want to go near or even talk of the place, and it's believed to be cursed by all of the people who died there. Today, most of the island is closed off to the public. However, a small section was opened for tourism in 2009 if you did ever want to visit, which I've no doubt would be an incredibly eerie experience. So that's 5 creepy abandoned places that are also said to be haunted. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I cannot wait for October, where I'll be doing loads of these creepy videos all month. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoy my content, then I'm sure you will enjoy the articles on the Top 5's website. You can click on the screen to check them out, even if you're on a mobile. Thanks again for watching, and as always, I will see you next week for another video.